All right, well, hello everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar, The Future of Metadata, Maximizing Data Potential. My name is Lindsay Pena, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the National States Geographic Information Council. If you are unfamiliar with our organization, NSGIC exists to advance the effective national coordination of geospatial information by supporting state-level cooperation. We serve as a national forum for the development of capable and future-oriented geospatial leadership. If you'd like to know more about information on NSGIC and how you can get involved with us, please visit our website at www.nsgic.org. Some reminders for our call today. All attendees have been muted on entrance. There will be time at the end of the presentation for Q&A, so please place your questions into the chat box. They'll be read aloud and answered at the end of the presentation as time allows. Additionally, a recorded version of this webinar will be made available afterwards, so keep an eye out for an email with that information. With that, I will now turn it over to our presenters.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you to NSGIC for hosting this wonderful webinar series. And welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jill Salago-Simmel. I'm the Principal Product Manager on our Open Platform team at Esri, and I'm joined with my colleague, Jordan. Jordan?
Hi, thanks, Jill. My name is Jordan Duft. I joined Jill and her team on the Open Platform team in May, and I'm the product manager for metadata search and discovery.
Great. You know, at Esri, we believe that sharing, collaboration, and interoperability are crucial to addressing today's challenges with urgency. And we know that metadata, catalogs, and search are an essential part of that journey. The value proposition of metadata has really doubled down in recent years. And we're excited today to share some of the ways that we're supporting your success with today's challenges and into the future. Metadata are a key component of the FAIR data principles. Your data are findable when they're richly described with your metadata. They're accessible when made available in machine-readable formats. Your geospatial data are interoperable when they're easily published and shared using open international standards like OGC APIs and open specifications like GeoServices REST. And your geospatial data are reusable when they're released with clear and accessible data usage licenses. The FAIR data principles are really important because the easier that your publicly shared data are discoverable, the more they're reused, which increases your return on investment. And metadata is crucial for geospatial search, discovery, and reuse. Let's just take a look at a few of the ways that your shared data and content are discoverable today. So many of you, about 40 different states, share your content through ArcGIS Hub, where your content are automatically search engine optimized or SEO'd. And your data are discoverable through a global ecosystem. Potential users will find your publicly shared data in your org from ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Online and the map viewer, maybe through the Living Atlas, and maybe even through the reuse in other hub sites. And outside of ArcGIS, your data are discoverable through integrated products like Microsoft and AutoCAD. I think that's really interesting to see how that global ecosystem has opened up. Of course, they're discoverable in search engine results pages, maybe in data.gov, and in the hub umbrella search, where content can be discovered from around the world. And this is a good place to mention some best practices for authoritative data providers, where we've put a QR code there in the corner, and we'll provide a link in the chat if you're interested. Because with these WebGIS patterns enabling your open data to be shared in a global ecosystem, good practices like naming conventions that make titles distinct are really, really impactful for data discovery. And discoverability is happening in new and exciting ways. I'm sure you're all part of conversations on artificial intelligence. Increasingly, metadata is a vital part of AI readiness for applications like large language models or LLMs. And has anyone on the call attended the Esri user conference this year and caught the plenary? There's a special clip that Jordan and I would like to share to kick off our conversation with you today. Let's take a look at this demo from Miami-Dade County in Florida from the user conference. It's about 3 minutes long. Jordan?
With our history of always pushing Esri to come up with new and innovative ways of doing things, we have partnered with them. And with this, we are integrating large language model, AI, generative AI, and spatial analytics to create our own Miami-Dade Wear Assistant. This Wear Assistant is trained to use the data that's in our Open Data Hub site. So only content from there will be leveraged. Here, we can click on one of the categories like cooling and energy. As you see, there are certain sample questions there for anyone who may not know what questions to ask. At this moment, the AI is interpreting the requests, searching the hub, leveraging the metadata to determine which data sets to use, and then summarizes it and returns. So yes, I said metadata for those that are paying attention. I hope you all adding great metadata out there. Miami-Dade County, we've been quite lucky. We had a metadata czar for quite some time. It's annoying at times, but look, now it's paying off. It's paying off very, very well because it's being used. It's being used in our Wear Assistant reasoning. And that's great. Our Wear Assistant is also inclusive of native languages. So right now we are asking it, ¿Dónde hay un centro de refrescamiento cerca del Tropical Park? Which means, is there a cooling center near Tropical Park? So the Wear Assistant is going to interpret that request and bring us back the answers by distance, and you'll be able to zoom into it and continue exploring and add additional data sets if needed. We are very mindful of AI, so we put guardrails in it to ensure that the responses are only from the information that we have in our Open Data Hub site. So this last request that Jose asked is outside the expertise of our Wear Assistant. So it suggests to go look at a different location, in this case 911, for a better response. This is some of the ways that we're leveraging our Wear Assistant to open doors to our community, and more to come. It is clear that enterprise GIS is critical to meeting our mayor's No Wrong Door initiative. As you've seen, we're seamlessly opening virtual doors, physical doors to our employees and to our community. And that's because of the partnership that we have with Esri, which is making this initiative come to life. Thank you.
I think that's such a great testimony to the work that so many of you on the call here today have done over the years with really driving the importance of metadata and getting good quality metadata in place for your organization. And as we can see, metadata drive search, discovery, and reuse to support the FAIR data principles. And it's increasingly vital for these AI readiness. So next, let's have a look at how ArcGIS supports this. Jordan?
Thanks, Jill. So geospatial metadata data exists all around us. But oftentimes, like metadata standards can be complex, and metadata management can be very difficult. And before I even started on the team knew that, it was time for a change. We've been looking at this. And so we really believe metadata can be delightful. It can be relevant and fit for purpose. It can meet technical requirements that you have. It really facilitates this discovery and collaboration, sharing and reuse, and supporting your vision, your innovation. And so, as we know, Jill and I know that this audience is very knowledgeable about metadata and how ArcGIS interacts with it. But as you're probably very well aware, not everybody is. So we do want to just conduct a baseline review to really showcase the messaging we have when we're talking about metadata. And we hope that it can help assess you as you're educating your stakeholders and people within your organization. So we're going to start here with the ArcGIS metadata superset. And so ArcGIS metadata superset, or ArcGIS metadata XML, is Esri's internal storage format for metadata. In itself, it's not a metadata standard. Again, it's a storage format, and it's a superset. I kind of think about it as like this metadata bucket. It's all of the metadata elements from the metadata standards ArcGIS supports. And so whether you're editing metadata elements in the item details page, or you're adhering to a specific ISO standard, FGDC, everything gets stored in this ArcGIS XML. And so how we then support, or how Esri then supports those standard-based metadata standards, is that we apply what's called metadata styles. And those metadata styles apply properties and these style sheets that take that metadata that we're storing in that metadata bucket, in that XML, and we're transforming it. So we're able to see in the metadata editor, here's the required elements we need to support said standard. Or if we transform it, when we view it in the HTML or the XML, it's specific to that metadata standard. And so by storing it in this superset, this bucket, right, it really gives flexibility to us. It provides the ability to go beyond a said metadata standard to fill out more metadata elements. It also gives us the opportunity to maybe support multiple metadata standards in concert with one another and be able to easily transform back and forth between them, applying those metadata styles. So it really just provides us gives us the opportunity, I guess should say, to really able to adapt with evolving changes within our organization in regards to metadata. And then next, we wanted to kind of talk about just briefly how ArcGIS platform works with metadata. So first and foremost, it starts with us, right? It starts with the data and the content and the metadata we have with it. And then from there, metadata should be tightly coupled with that data. It should flow. So as we're publishing and producing and collaborating and sharing and reusing, and it's this interconnected of geospatial ecosystems, that metadata is flowing with that data through the ArcGIS platform, but also beyond. And through that process, right, we are hopefully, as the data is evolving, the metadata is evolving. So we're editing that metadata. Historically speaking, we had different experiences when we were editing metadata. We had different metadata editors depending on where you were in the platform. But the team has been heads down working on this, and they've come out with what you may have heard as the unified metadata editor, the metadata editor that unifies that editing experience. No matter where you are in the platform, it's that delightful experience we're striving for. Of course, as we're editing metadata, it ends up in the ArcGIS metadata superset. We're able to adhere to those different metadata standards by applying metadata styles, those style sheets that transform that metadata, and then we are able to view them in HTML and XML records. This is primarily how our audiences are interacting with the metadata that we're curating. And then finally, like thinking about the bigger picture and the bigger vision is thinking about how we can further interact with that metadata in catalogs and search and discovery through federation of systems again. So I know this is like barely scratching the surface. Jill and I did have a presentation at UC that's a pretty robust, good introduction if you'd like to share with your users within your organization that want to just kind of up their metadata game a little bit. So I put that there for us. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Jill to kick us off with metadata challenges and some solutions that we have.
Jill, I think you're on mute.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. And thanks, Jordan, for that introduction, that overview of how ArcGIS handles metadata. As you all are intimately familiar with metadata, and we're always trying to equip you with resources to help communicate some of these concepts with your community of interest. So Jordan, recently I heard a colleague say demo, not memo. So how about we just demonstrate a few of these new metadata capabilities that offer solutions to these common challenges?
I like that, Jill. So we're gonna start with a challenge, a metadata challenge that most of us maybe come to mind when we're talking metadata, which is metadata isn't delightful. So like maybe reading between the lines, right? Metadata is boring, metadata is difficult, it's confusing, it takes too much time. And often it's an afterthought. If we're lucky, maybe it even happens at all. So the team, again, I just want to give props to the team. The team has been heads down, really attempting to change this narrative. So spread the word. Metadata is on the path to becoming delightful. And we're really starting here with this metadata editor, often again referred to that unified metadata editor as it's a consistent experience across the platform. And this interface is going to make you smile. So I want to kick off kind of looking at this loop, this GIF that we have on loop here is this essential metadata that we're looking at. And so instead of having to, try to figure out what's required for an ISO standard, it tells you in that essential metadata tab which elements are required, and it provides you that list. And so instead of having to look that up or go through the different tabs, it allows you to bring you right to where you're going to be editing that metadata. Not only is it bringing you right to where you need to be, when you fill it out, it gives you this really beautiful green check, really elevating all of your dopamine. The required elements like a score bar goes across, really helping you determine what's required and where you can find it. Another experience that I really like about the editor is you're able to have that search bar. So again, if you want to go beyond what's in the required and the essential, you're able to do that and find that more effectively. And then I don't want to step on Jill's toes, but there's a really delightful override experience that we have in the editor as well, which she'll touch on a little bit later. So that's what we're working on in the editing space. The next challenge we want to talk about is understanding and leveraging metadata management and flow. So metadata management and flow isn't the issue, it's understanding it and leveraging it, right? So data we talked about already should be tightly coupled with metadata. So we often receive questions about, okay, but where do we maintain metadata? Or where do we edit the metadata? How should it be managed? So again, it comes down to data. Data should be driving that decision, right? So when data moves, metadata should be moving. When data is evolving, metadata should be evolving. And so we're gonna kind of take a look and go through this journey. We'll kick off here with some publishing workflow. All right. So taking us on this journey here, we are in ArcGIS Pro. And so when we're in ArcGIS Pro and we're publishing, we have two options. We can publish to ArcGIS Online, or we can publish to ArcGIS Enterprise. Let's go ahead, we'll kick off and we'll start off here with ArcGIS Online. So when we publish to ArcGIS Online, what happens to the data? The data gets copied, right? It's the same thing that's going to happen with that metadata. So it's completely cut off from the source location where it was, right? Back in ArcGIS Pro, that original feature class, that sits wherever it was stored. And that data and metadata have now been copied and should be managed at the web layer. Now, of course, when we publish ArcGIS Enterprise, it gets a little interesting. So we can mimic the first pattern in ArcGIS Online, where the data and the metadata are copied over. Now it's not copied over to ArcGIS Online, right? It's going to be on your enterprise, on your own infrastructure. Or we can take the second option when we're publishing to ArcGIS Enterprise, and we can reference the data and the metadata in place. And so in that event, we're telling ArcGIS Enterprise, hey, ArcGIS Enterprise, don't copy my data. come look at it in this location. We're referencing it in a place here. So the data and the metadata are going to be maintained elsewhere. And we're going to tell ArcGIS server or ArcGIS Enterprise in this case, right, to look at that data and that metadata and pull that in. So we're going to just take a look at what does this look like in, the UI in ArcGIS Enterprise. We'll use that as an example. Okay, so we're in ArcGIS Enterprise. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pull open our first layer here. Now this layer, I decided I was going to copy it. So it's a hosted feature layer. And I want to point out that I can edit the metadata at the layer level. I know I can edit the metadata at the layer level because it's blue. So when it's blue, it tells me I have the opportunity to come in here and edit the metadata in the metadata editor. Same thing, if I click on the sub layer, I'm also able to edit the metadata editor. Why? Or edit the metadata in the metadata editor. And the reason is because we've copied that over, right? I'm able to manage the metadata here because it was copied here. But let's look at the other side of this, right? So what happens if we reference that data? Maybe I'll come back here to content. So when I published this layer, I told ArcGIS Enterprise, don't copy it. Look at this location. So I registered a data store. So I just kind of want to point out for roads and major faults, if I come in here to Server Manager, and I click on the service that I published, and I click on the geodatabase scan, I've registered a data store. So it's an enterprise geodatabase backed by Postgres. And this is where the service is looking at that data, and therefore it's looking at that metadata for both the roads and the major faults. If we come back to our portal, right, our ArcGIS Enterprise portal, notice something. I'm actually going to go the opposite way this time. I'm going to go to the sublayers first. So I'm going to click on roads. When I click on roads, notice that it is not blue. It's actually a white button now. And when I click on metadata, the editor doesn't open, I'm able to simply view the metadata. The reason why that is because I'm unable to manage the metadata from this location because it's referencing that in place. So if I needed to make changes to the metadata, I would need to go to where it's accessing that metadata, which in this case is a feature class in that enterprise geodatabase. What's interesting about this use case is, again, it has multiple sublayers within, right, a larger feature layer. Notice I am able to edit the metadata for this feature layer. It's only the sublayers. So this is a different kind of hierarchical piece, right? So it's pulling in the feature classes. Those were the two that I published, but they're pulled into a larger metadata piece, right? They're pulled into a larger entity, which in this case is the feature layer, which I am able to edit and manage. So it's important to kind of think through our data and our strategy, not only in terms of data and publishing, but also how does that metadata interact with the data across the platform? Okay. Coming back, so now maybe once we've published, we want to collaborate. We want to start bringing in other organizations to share our data. So we're going to talk about distributed collaboration workflows next. So for those of us who aren't as familiar or just need a quick refresher, distributed collaboration really allows our organizations to share data across multiple organizations or multiple portals. And it really fosters this ability to work with projects and to be able to share data and maintain a synchronized copy of that data or in reference of that geospatial data. So again, looking at this diagram that we have in our ArcGIS Enterprise, we have a distributed collaboration set up between Enterprise and ArcGIS Online. And so when we're syncing, a layer in this case, right, is copied to ArcGIS Online. When we make changes to this original layer in ArcGIS Enterprise and we synchronize, not only are those changes of that data going to be synchronized to that ArcGIS Online through that distributed collaboration, but so is the metadata. And this is really exciting because this wasn't happening not too long ago. So this is a relatively new thing that we're pretty excited about. And again, similar to the publishing workflows, I just want to take a moment to see what this looks like in practice. So I'm going to pull back open. Maybe refresh, hopefully. So in ArcGIS Enterprise, I have a group set up. I have distributed collaboration already done. So I'm kind of showing you the aftermath of it all. So you can tell we've got this really nice badge to let me know that's in a distributed collaboration. And I'm going to go ahead. This is one of the layers that we just looked at, right? And so in this case, as I mentioned, I'm able to manage the metadata for the feature layer here. And the sub-layer of metadata is being maintained at the feature class level. When we now set up this distributed collaboration, as I did with ArcGIS Online, so now we're in ArcGIS Online, to kind of point this out, this URL has changed. If I come here to my groups, we have the layer. So this is that copied layer that made its way to ArcGIS Online, hosted on ArcGIS Online. Metadata flows, it's great news. But I want to point out here, so notice that the button is no longer blue for as it was, right, in ArcGIS Enterprise. That's because ArcGIS Online in this configuration is the receiving portal. ArcGIS Enterprise is sending data and metadata to ArcGIS Online, and therefore we don't want ArcGIS Online to be in charge of that metadata, right? The data is flowing in a particular way. So we've tried to be very intentional and make it as streamlined as possible to think how metadata might the kind of the right flow and the right metadata management should be for these workflows. And then finally, data and metadata continue maybe to move to open data catalogs and other integrated geospatial infrastructures, SDIs. And I'm going to let Jill go ahead and take that one.
Thank you, Jordan. Of looking at how the metadata flow, as Jordan pointed out, that's really an important part of the metadata management, as you have your metadata and your data closely coupled flowing through the system. And of course, the metadata flow with the content that you share to your geospatial hub catalogs, and the data and metadata automatically hydrate those catalogs when you federate to open data. So when we add content to our open data groups, the data and the metadata dynamically flow into Hub, and you can take it further because Hub uses standards-based catalog feeds like DCAT, the data catalog vocabulary, so that you can easily federate to third-party open data sites such as data.gov or data.europa.eu. And we've already started working on the DCAT version 3 to support these next generation data.gov and fairness projects.
So our next challenge is really the inevitable, right? Challenge with metadata and really arguably anything in life, like things change. So what we are doing to assist and kind of really hoping, right, that this so it's not just becoming this metadata monolithic document that ultimately becomes stale, is we're really trying to drive as much as possible this automation of auto-populating and syncing metadata elements. So in this particular GIF that we kind of have on loop is this idea that, let's say your organization doesn't have metadata even enabled, but you've convinced or you have your organization filling out item details. As soon as you enable metadata and you take a look at and open that metadata editor for the first time, anything that was in your item details is going to be synchronized to the metadata automatically. So it's already giving you just a head start. So do this today. I would definitely recommend, if we're not doing this already, it's just an easy way to get started. And we're not stopping there. We're definitely taking some time and identifying other ways we can just automatically bring in and drive information from the data into our metadata. So item details, we have terms of use that automatically gets moved over into our constraints. We automatically populate a metadata file identifier. We pull in the web service into the online distribution as an access link. We're excited for the upcoming roadmap where we are working towards the ability to synchronize attribute fields and field information into the metadata as well. So there's some exciting things that are happening here.
So Jordan, my idea of delightful metadata is the metadata that I don't even need to touch. So as much automation and syncing that can happen behind the scenes to really make that metadata active is delightful to me. And for some of you, maybe you have some data layers in your organization that don't have metadata yet, but they have pretty good item information. So as we're working through some of these challenges, like Jordan talked about, just the challenge of making it easier, the challenges about metadata flow. One of your challenges may be improving those data layers that don't yet have metadata. How do you improve quickly your data holdings? One way is to apply a basic metadata template where you can combine that existing item information with metadata from a template using the overwrite command. And we're excited to show you that this is now easier than ever. So in this example, I'm creating a collection of layers that still need metadata. I've created items, one item in particular to act as my metadata template for my new items. And if you use template metadata, you want to think carefully about what values to include. In my case, I added some placeholder text for my organizational information to get me as close as possible to minimally compliant ISO 19115-3 metadata. And I copy the URL from my template and go to my new item, and notice a lot is incomplete. Using overwrite, I can paste that source item template URL and complete the remaining elements in that metadata. So now my item has complete essential metadata that I can further refine. And this new overwrite command will take not only what it's done in the past where you download and you have a file that you need to upload to do that overwrite. Now you can use the item URL or item ID just to make that overwrite happen like that. Jordan?
Hey, Jill, sorry, the clicking is not working for me today. One other thing I just wanted to mention, a challenge is kind of advanced use cases when things change. And we are doing what we can to really leverage additional resources with additional ArcGIS capabilities and partner with other stakeholders and partners, industry partners. So last month, actually, we had the opportunity to collaborate with Safe Software and the ArcGIS data interoperability team to really kind of talk through how we could maybe generate importing metadata during ETL or bulk updates for our metadata within our portal. So we do have the QR code up here. So definitely check this out. We would say that this is a little bit more of an advanced audience, or at least an audience with a little bit more familiarity with data interoperability and ETL workflows.
Yeah. And lastly, let's consider maybe what I think is an interesting way to use some of these new metadata patterns in a combined fashion. So my early example, when I was talking about metadata discoverability, you may have seen the CDC, Center for Disease Control's Social Vulnerability Index. It's a nationwide layer that many states and other jurisdictions here in the US like to make their own and reshare. So traditionally, we would have downloaded and clipped and republished to share that nationwide data in a more local context. With WebGIS, this can all be done dynamically, saving you time and resources, and the data will always be current with the source data provider. So the CDC layer is authoritative, and it's shared with the Living Atlas. Oh, there we go. And so we can be confident that it's reliable for reuse. We're going to go to the visualization tab to filter the layer to a state view. And because this happens to have multiple sublayers, I've pre-staged it here, but we'll filter it to each state, in this case, the state of Texas, and save it as a new layer, giving it a distinguishable name using of Texas in the title, and create this as a new saved layer that references dynamically that source layer. Now, this new layer lacks metadata, so we're going to copy that source layer URL for our overwrite in much the same way that we showed with that template metadata. We'll follow that same workflow, pasting the source URL, source layer into the overwrite, and leverage that existing source metadata like description and terms of use. And then we can go in and we can add more context by updating the geographic extent and adding other information to reflect our filtered content. So our new layer, which again is dynamically referencing the CDC source data, is in pretty good shape. We can continue to make it our own by updating the thumbnail or other information. Now, like Jordan showed previously with the referenced layers, the sublayer metadata isn't a copy. It's dynamically referencing the source. So it's always up to date with the source layers. And we can share this new layer with the public and with our respective hub site, and the data with my state context and its metadata are flowing all the way through to our hub site, to end users to reuse. And it's all dynamic. So as changes happen, we receive those changes. And I want to just give a special shout out on this one to Indiana GIO Megan Compton for really helping to push us forward with this particular web GIS pattern. So where are we headed? I think this is a good place to stop and reflect, and let's look at the roadmap, see where we've come from, where we're at today, and maybe most importantly, where we see the future. Jordan?
Thanks, Jill. Yeah, so this year there were some really big moments. The metadata editor came out of beta and ArcGIS Enterprise fully supported. The team has been working and continues to work towards really simplifying, making it a delightful experience, metadata editor experience. And we're just like incredibly excited for the vision, the road ahead. There's some really big things. Definitely the top of our list that we're very excited about is bringing in that metadata editor into ArcGIS Pro, kind of bringing that together in that unifying experience. We're looking at bringing in Dublin Core, so this more simplified metadata standard that we hope would be like the default across the platform. For folks, just like an easy lift, so to have standard-based metadata. Continuing, of course, with metadata flow and refinement. We're excited that on the horizon, there's an AI metadata assist. So an actual, an assist that would help you kind of with that cold start problem of getting started with metadata, to kind of help you create high quality metadata and get that off the ground as well. Additionally, creating custom profiles, being able to refine the metadata standards that we have in place to fit your needs. Jill mentioned work on the DCAT US 3, and then we'll be bidding farewell to the Metadata Editor Classic in 2025. It's been a good run, but we're ready to move forward with metadata. Jill, did I miss anything, or do you want to add anything from this year?
Good overview.
Great. Yeah, it's a great team to be on, and it's just really amazing to see the work what's being done. So where we really see the future and where the team has this locked in on is, first and foremost, just reimagining metadata. I think there's some change management to do, and thinking through like why what's the value. And some people have known the value. Jill and I were having this conversation yesterday. There have been people that have felt the value, but really it's coming to fruition for a lot of people are seeing the line. So kind of reimagining metadata, like minimal effort, really powering or empowering geospatial ecosystems. This idea of active metadata. So metadata that's working for you, not against you. It's providing insights and suggestions. It's observing things and it's adapting to that change. It's powering, again, that smarter search and discovery, supporting that AI readiness that we saw at the beginning. And importantly, right, like linking people to data and models and really being strategic about aligning our goals. So again, bringing that data, the metadata, it's effortless access. It's enhancing and it's enriching our strategies so that we're really able to hopefully push forward and let metadata support that creative innovation that a lot of you are all doing every single day. And so I really, again, it's a great team to be on. It's an exciting space at the moment. Maybe it's always been, but it's really kind of feels like we're kind of on this cusp of a wave. And so I truly mean this when I say we really invite you to join the Esri community. We want to shape the future with you. So please connect with us, share the pain, the challenges, share what's good. Again, we're excited and we're excited to see where metadata takes all of us and takes you. So thank you for letting us present and be with you all today.
Thank you so much for your presentation. We've had a pretty busy, active chat going on, so I will go through and read some of the questions and comments. So one comment was wanting to know if these slides would be made available to us to share with the group. And if so, we can definitely get that, get that from you, and it'll be posted with this recording in our NSGIC knowledge base that will be made available. And then you did reference a UC presentation that you all did that went into a little bit more deeper dive. And so there was a request if those links could be shared. And if you don't have those available right now, we can definitely get that information from you and include it in the follow-up to this presentation. And
I will grab the link right now to the user conference presentation and stick it in the chat for everyone. And we can get the other link to the FME, more advanced presentation. Make sure we grab that as well. Jordan, maybe you can.
Yes, work on that.
Perfect. So next question, excuse me. I think one of the main questions I have here is how can we make the metadata process quicker for creating when you're publishing a survey 123 form? As you know, this automatically creates a feature service on Enterprise or AGOL. How is the metadata editor incorporated into that process moving forward?
Go ahead, Jordan.
Thanks, Jill. That's a great question. And actually, while we were at UC, we heard a lot of interesting use cases that I've been digging into of how Survey 123 is actually being used to help to make sure it's kind of like a stopgap and making sure that people actually fill out metadata before it's able to go on. So I've kind of heard some interesting use cases to say with Survey 123. At the moment, I would say probably the most obvious thing is what Jill presented is being able to templatize that and use those templates to quickly bring in that metadata that you need. We don't have, to my knowledge at this time, anything on the roadmap of that interconnection specifically with Survey 123 as you're bringing it in, but it's certainly interesting. And we'd love, again, if you connect with us in the Esri community and kind of fill out kind of like a use case and what you identify as what's missing. We would love to investigate and look at that further for development. I don't know if Jill, if anything comes to mind for you that I missed or.
I think you've got it covered.
Okay.
Great. So what is the best practice? Metadata be created at the time of geospatial acquisition or after the acquisition process?
Yeah, I think that historically, metadata has come kind of as an afterthought, and there's been people that have, their careers are dedicated to being the metadata manager and to completing that metadata, which means a lot of going back to the subject matter experts that are the data creators and kind of fishing out all of that information in order to create the metadata. And we do see a paradigm shift happening where more and more the metadata, just like Jordan was showing with the workflows, the metadata being managed with the data. And so I think that more and more over time, we really will see this best practice be the metadata being created at time of acquisition or at time of that kind of early management and publication. And then it be actively maintained throughout the life cycle.
Are metadata and data copied together when running scripts to download content from ArcGIS online for backup purposes?
I do think at this time there are some challenges with metadata flow and downloads. We are actively aware and are working on that. Certainly, again, I will just reiterate, interested in the actual workflows and use cases. It's always helpful to come with evidence that, again, people are having challenges with that. Jill, if you want to add anything further. Okay.
Will there be more editing features added to ArcPro's metadata editing tab? I have to use an EPA tool in order to store basic contact information, import metadata from feature classes, and export. I would love for a simple features like this to be standard, and I don't quite understand why they aren't. And then kind of follow up. I believe I had more editing tools in Arc Catalog.
Well, I'll take a first stab at that one. As Jordan kind of showed that process, the workflow of how ArcGIS handles metadata, we have historically had, because products have developed at different times, those metadata editors have been different across the product line. So this effort in part is to bring together and unify that metadata editing experience. You're not seeing it in Pro yet because it's not there. That is the top priority in terms of the roadmap, is to get this new editor into ArcGIS Pro. But it won't at first have feature parity with the existing editor. And one of the primary things there is the metadata toolkit, where organizations like EPA have customized that metadata for their organization. So much like we're doing today in Pro, the classic Pro metadata editor will live side by side with the new editor for the foreseeable future. And as we continue to build out this more functionality with the new editor, including that ability to do custom metadata profiles, we'll evolve that so that eventually it's all one and unified. Jordan, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you got it. I think it's solid. Thanks, Jill.
Can we use the metadata templates with notebooks?
You can. There's actually, I think Esri puts out by default in the sample notebooks. I forget what exactly. I think it's to make sure you're valid. It's a validation notebook, which can be very helpful. So you can use it with notebooks. It gets tricky when we're going beyond kind of more item description metadata. So that's where scripting gets a little bit more challenging, because you have to be able to have the skill set to really go in and be able to manipulate the XML. But it's possible. We are, again, aware of the challenges and looking to make, in the future, hopefully making that a little bit easier to automate more of this.
Out of curiosity, what sort of metadata requirements are necessary for inclusion with AI? Are there specific items that you foresee being necessary to integrate them into LLMs?
Jordan?
Yeah, I certainly do. I think, so spatially, right? Extents come immediately to mind, like making sure the extent, the spatial reference, the description, the abstract, terms of use, like things like if we just kind of think through, like Jill had this really great list the other day of kind of just this this journey that a user goes through when they start to like look for data, right? So if you kind of think, you know, as you're finding data fit for purpose, like what are those main things that you're looking for? And Jill, I feel like you maybe have this a little bit more fleshed out, but like, you know, thinking about the discoverability of it, how would you find it? Okay, now that you found it, how can you use it? And it's this kind of this process. And I would think if you kind of go through and identify those metadata elements in that sense, those are going to be the ones that really you're going to want to make sure that you have a kind of a robust answer and that, or value rather, in that metadata element. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
You know, I'm going to say this, and some people might laugh, but you know, AI is not smarter than us. AI learns from us. It's certainly faster than us, but it's not going to, except for in hallucinations, which really do happen. It's not going to come up with, you know, the right answer on its own. And so, yeah, the discoverability metadata, I think the field attribute information is also a key piece, that data dictionary type of attributes, so that as AI is looking for answers actually within the database, that it understands what those fields represent. That can be key. But as our teams are working on AI and LLMs, we'll definitely be putting out some guidance and good practices to help guide people along.
Great, and I will give you both a little break and I will take the next question. So I'd like to share this presentation with our agency's GIS data stewards. Will the recording of the presentation be publicly available? And then a comment, really great presentation, by the way. So yes, this will be available. If you registered for this presentation, it will go out in an email afterwards. We will also be posting this on our NSGIC knowledge base. So if you go to nsgic.org and you can find our knowledge base and search through this and all, you know, content, and this will be publicly available. All right. So our organization has purchased GeoJob prior to learning about this. Do you see this as a duplicative, or is this something that GeoJob can add and create rich metadata content?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. At this point in time, I don't see those as being duplicative. There may be a few kind of functions in there where there's similarities, but there's so much that GeoJob does that's, you know, well beyond the metadata management piece. I would say, like, I haven't personally really looked at how they're complementary and where there might be that overlap, but just in my familiarity with the GeoJob tools, I don't think that that's duplicative that you'd need to be concerned about there.
Is it possible to have the synchronization of metadata in Enterprise without enabling data store?
So I think the question, so is it possible to reference metadata from the data without registering the data store? And the answer is, at this time, no, because it's tied to the data. So it's an interesting, I would be interested to hearing more about the use case if you know, feel free to connect with us, but at this time, that is not how the pattern works.
Is there an effort happening to get a single nationwide standard? I think you showed a slide that showed about combining standards NGDC, ISO, and DCAT. I'm also seeing something about OGC.
I'm not aware of efforts underway to get a single US nationwide standard. Really, ArcGIS supports the variety of standards. The most common ones that we see people using within the US are the FGDC, CSDGM, that content standard for geospatial metadata, and the ISO standards. With the ArcGIS metadata superset, it really supports both, and the transformation between them can happen on the fly. Within data.gov, there is a fairness project where they're looking at the data catalog vocabulary, DCAT, version 3, to unify across the standards how data is shared between catalogs. So from that perspective with data.gov, that is a unifying effort. But as far as a single nationwide standard for metadata, we're really not there yet.
Is there a way to batch update metadata with this? I work with a statewide data set as well as the individual counties, and I use batch tools to update some of the info on the metadata based on the updates. How would I be able to do this without updating each file?
It's a good question. So a couple different ways. Again, it's going to depend on where you're pulling that data metadata from. So Jill highlighted a really nice pattern that's really flexible in terms of creating that template. So you could create a template, right? You could create a fake, even like a feature layer, and create that template piece, and then just go through and script that so that it goes through each however many items and pulls in that template as that overwrite. To me, that would probably be the easiest way to move forward. Additionally, as I mentioned with our collaboration last month, leveraging data interoperability, we partnered with Safe Software. They highlighted the ability to basically pull, like they're pulling data from an open data site and being able, as that open data site updates its metadata, that it's not a reference to that metadata. So they're having to like always manually update that. But with the workbench is what they call it, they're able to pull in that metadata from the source, that open data site, and update a number of different layers at the same time. So that would also be a pattern.
All right, we'll take one last question. So aside from making the tools more delightful, any other words of wisdom, best practices, or good examples of how organizations can create incentives for their GIS staff to take metadata more seriously?
That's probably the toughest question yet.
I think from my perspective, and Jordan, I will welcome your input as well. From my perspective, I really think, like I said, the whole arena around metadata, I think, has upped its game in the last, just really in the last year, maybe just a little bit longer, particularly around the concepts of AI readiness, and active metadata. So for all of your executives, your CIOs and CDOs, and you as GIOs and other geospatial authorities, really leveraging that value proposition for your broader organization in problem solving and in meeting your mission requirements around AI. People are really excited in this area. It's a really interesting area to be, and there's a very broad recognition across kind of the full spectrum of decision makers of the value of metadata in making this all happen. So just like as geospatial coordinating professionals, we wouldn't waste a crisis in really kind of emphasizing why geospatial is so important. We should really leverage the interest and activity, I think, in those areas to really emphasize and get people within your organization excited and where they understand the value of the work that they're doing in making those missions happen. So that's just my perspective on it.
All right, well, we are at the top of the hour. So thank you all for attending today's presentation. And thank you so much to our two presenters. We appreciate you both, and we look forward to seeing you all on the next call.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.